Hey, Barbell Logic listeners. What you're about to hear is one of a few episodes I recorded with my original co-host, Scott Hambrick. His life and lifting have changed a lot since you last heard him on the podcast. And in these episodes, we discussed what's changed and just catch up. And we also talk about lifting. Now, an important reminder that these podcasts are for entertainment purposes only. Scott's opinions are not necessarily the opinions of Barbell Logic or myself, but it makes for some pretty damn entertaining conversations. So Scott and I touch on cultural and political stuff that we don't normally touch on in the podcast. So if you don't want to hear that stuff, it's totally fine. We'll return to our normal podcast for barbell enthusiasts and coaches in just a couple weeks. If you've missed Scott on the podcast, I'm happy to bring this to you. I'm really proud of the podcast we recorded together, and I'm excited to have him back on the podcast for a few episodes. You can always listen to some of the older podcasts with Scott that are out in individual episodes or re-released in the series. If you want to just hear Scott, you can check out one of his podcasts, the Online Great Books podcast, the Music and Ideas podcast, and his new one, the Growing Resilience podcast, links for which you can find in the show notes. I hope you all enjoy the shows. You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast. I'm Matt Reynolds. I'm here with Scott Hambrick. Welcome back to the show at the beautiful Hambrick farm in the middle of America somewhere.
That's right. Undisclosed location. Yeah, you doxed me. We had to start over again.
We did. We already did this once. I gave the address and the GPS location.
Ridiculous.
But so we restarted. So, hey, man, how's it going?
It's hot.
Yeah, we got lucky today.
Yeah.
It's still hot today, but it's been horrible this week.
Yeah, it's been over 100 for 8-10 days. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm beat down.
Are you still working in the afternoons out here the whole time, or do you end up having to shut down in the afternoons?
I'm really not getting much done. I'll work from 6 till maybe 10 a.m., and then I go read or, do something in the shop or something, and then maybe 7 o'clock in the evening, come back out and work till dark or something like that. So, I'm getting maybe 6 hours of stuff done.
When did that start? About early June, because it's been hot all summer. It was a nice May.
Mid-June, I guess. I burned out.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
It's been a terrible year. We got, we got like 10 inches of rain in 2 weeks, the first part of June, and it was cool and windy and overcast. I planted my garden twice because it just, 10 inches of rain in 2 weeks.
Like washed away.
Yeah. Well, just everything just rotted in the ground. And then it hasn't rained in a month, and it's been 100 degrees for 10 days or whatever. It's going to be 100 degrees. Maybe not today, not tomorrow, but then starting again Sunday.
Yeah, for the foreseeable future. Yeah,
for the next
10-day forecast. Yeah, I've been looking at it every day.
It's great.
How long you guys been out here now?
We've lived here for 18 months now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so,
but I bought it in November of 2019.
Lots of questions about, and of course, I'll let you give however much detail you want to give about life on the Hambrick homestead and how has life changed. So again, people know we hosted the podcast together for the first 3 or 4 years, and then you sold your business in what year? In 19?
Last day of 2018.
Last day of 2018.
Yeah.
And then started moving this direction. And, you were thinking about this, right? You started looking for land and thinking about farming.
Kind of not.
No?
Kind of not. We had that house, the house that you'd been to in Tulsa. We bought that house. One of the reasons we bought that particular house is because it was like 2 miles from a level 4 trauma center. It had like big, wide halls and doorways. Like it was handicap accessible.
Sure.
We're like, we can be here forever.
Yep.
And sold that business, and I was like, man, I'm not going to do anything for a year. I've heard, like, if you've been through a divorce or the death of a loved one or something like this, you shouldn't really make any big decisions for a year, So we really didn't do much for a year. I lifted and ate and slept, got PRs in November of that year, which I'll never break again because I'm never, ever going to be that idle ever again, probably. And I read a book in the mid-year John Sr. wrote this book. It's called The Restoration of Christian Culture. I was laying in bed. I read it. I finished it. I was like, handed it to Charity. I was like, you got to read this book. So she's like, all right, and then she read it and she closed the book and this is like a week later, she finishes it. She closed the book and she says, I guess we're moving.
I guess what we got to do.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, I think so. So we started looking and found this place. And
so hold on. So I would assume, so the culture of that book that it sort of expounds on is focused on family, self-reliance, personal responsibility, sort of a return to Christendom values, or like
it's kind of deeper than that. It's more about like he also when he would talk to secular audiences, John Sr., he was a professor at the University of Kansas, and he started a great books program there in the late 60s with 2 other guys. And it was probably the best great books program that there has been. He would take young people that were part of his program to Europe every summer, and they would stay at monasteries and go to these cultural sites and whatever. And so he would take like 15 kids, and he would come home with 14. Like one of them would stay with the monasteries, And after a number of years of this, there were allegations in the University of Kansas that he had been proselytizing the students, and they had this big hearing.
So hold on. So this is the guy, we've talked about this, they have the monastery back here now, right?
That's right.
Just outside of Oklahoma City or something, is that right?
So years later, in France, there are like 30 Midwesterners who are now in their middle age,
Right.
And the mother monastery in France is like, here's some money, go start a new monastery. They came to the United States. They went all over the place. They ultimately bought 1,600 acres, I think, in Hulbert, and started a monastery. And it's now an abbey. It's a full-blown standalone thing. But that's really, I don't know if it's because of John Sr., but it's, he was a big part of that ultimately happening.
Right. Okay.
So they had this hearing and investigation into these allegations of them proselytizing these students, and it was found to be not true. That had not been happening. Just when you read those books, it kind of can happen.
Right.
But they ultimately pulled the plug on that program anyway. But when he would talk to secular audiences, instead of talking about the restoration of Christian culture, he would often talk about the restoration of realism. And he would say that, even in the 60s and the 70s, he knew that life was becoming sort of more virtual and more disconnected from reality. And he in that book, he talks about an ideal children's school for boys is the example that he gives, where where they would live with no heating and air, no electricity, in fact, and they have to tend a garden, and they would be encouraged to, do risky play. Like, he wants them to get injured, not badly, but you learn something when you fall out of a tree when you're a little kid, and to get them rooted in realism and live close to the weather, and anyway, he makes a 300-page argument for, how to return to this realism. And, I handed the book to Charity. She's like, oh God, I guess we're moving. So we did.
So you've visited this abbey, not a monastery.
It's an abbey now.
So, and I remember you telling me stories about, they are these men that are there. They're doing things not even for their life. This is for hundreds of years down the road. So they've built a stone chapel, right, by hand, and then there's like rock walls around the place, and now they've got dormitories and all that, right? They go and they work the land. You talked about, you go and you've gone there, but they take a vow of hospitality or something, and you can go and stay.
They're Benedictine,
and they feed. You were talking about the food. Tell me what's the food like. So a lot of these guys that came from, they were French trained. I mean, they were living in France, right? So they have this incredible, and they're living off the land and eating food off of the land. And so
they're Benedictine, so they have these vows of work and hospitality and prayer, right? And you go down there and you stay with them, and their vows of hospitality don't mean like hugging you and spending a lot of time and playing cards with you, but they put you up, and they will give you a spiritual director if you want one, and you can walk the grounds. You take meals with them. Of course, they're vows of silence most of the day too, so they're not chatting it up with you. But you go down there, and it's mealtime, and the abbot washes your hands for you, and you go in there and sit down, and they bring this food that gosh, they've probably been cooking it by these same recipes for 800 years.
Yeah.
And they bring in these, they'll bring a light bread and then like a dark rye bread, homemade butter, homemade yogurt. Like I was
They
down,
said like they passed around the cauldron.
yeah,
And you're like, what is in there? And it's like a little bit green and like they're like slopping it. And you're like, I don't know if this looks great.
yeah, they
And
brought
then
a
you eat
crock. And these guys were just dishing this snot out of this crock on their plates, and then they would put a little sugar on it, and they were just like, they eat like animals. There are no
Because they work
women.
all day.
Yeah, they work all day.
And you said they eat a light breakfast and a light lunch, and then they kind of kill it for dinner.
They barely even sit down for breakfast.
Right.
Like they just blow
It's
through
like
there
a
like
piece
locusts.
of meat or a boiled egg or something.
Yeah, and they just move on, and then lunch will be like soup and a salad or something like that. But dinner's pretty serious. Anyway, they eat like pigs. But they were serving this snot up. I'm like, well, I'm here. I'm going to eat this snot.
Right.
And it was homemade yogurt,
And
and
they're
it
like,
was
bro.
the best stuff ever.
Yeah.
But everything they cook is like that. And, yeah.
And even like the salad, you're saying like wildflower salad, stuff they gathered on the land, wild stuff, garden stuff. And then they've got I remember you saying they've got like all the great books of Western civilization. They've rebound them in thick leather and like made it so that they're going to last for hundreds of years.
Yeah. If they have a book binder there. And so if they buy a book or a book is given to them, if they decide that it's worth having, they just take it all apart and rebind it. And, everything they do is, with longevity in mind.
Sure.
And they don't want to do it twice.
Sure.
Yeah. It's
So
pretty
to
neat.
me, obviously you're not a monk. And so nobody ever confused you for a monk. But I think how has that idea of longevity, of not living for the moment, sort of impacted what you're doing out here on the Hambrick farm?
Well, I don't know if it comes from them. I mean, I'm just stingy. My people are all stingy, that sort of buy once, cry once sort of mentality where you buy the better tool and spend the more money or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I've kind of
And
always
it
been
lasts.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. I like that very much. And in current year, I also don't really know how young people are going to be able to make it if the people that have come before them don't, help provide more resources and, confer, advantages on them, So, that's one of the things I want to do is to make sure that, all of my posterity, that we can give them whatever kinds of leg up we can, if that means like real food and, a place to build a shack, then that's what it's going to be.
Yeah, so you've got a fair amount of acreage out here. How much do you have?
56.
56 acres out here, and you've got. You built a pole barn, right?
Yep.
Is that?
Yep.
And moved into the pole barn, and so it's a big. I don't know what the square footage is. Pretty good size.
It's 40 by 70.
Yeah.
And we've only got about 900 square feet that's air conditioned.
Right. So
That's
the
our
bedrooms
and the
are air
bathroom.
conditioned. You got 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. They're air conditioned. Your kind of living room, kitchen areas sort of built in the open barn area. It's not air conditioned. It's not heated. You've got a wood stove. We've been here in the wintertime. Everybody hangs out around the wood stove. But it's funny because you lived in this super nice suburban home in Tulsa. And I remember when I first came out here, you said more of your friends come out here and hang out here now than ever did then. And most people would have looked at like, I don't want to go hang out in a barn that doesn't have air conditioning, doesn't have heat. But there's something that's very sort of community oriented when you come out here. You guys play cards. Again, it's more real stuff. I think you don't have the constant distraction of internet, YouTube, video games, stuff like that. It's like we sit around, we have good conversation, we read books, we can fruit, we play cards. Like, what's that like?
It's crazy. That is not at all what we expected. I have a hard time in the fall getting anything done because there are people here all the time. I've got 3 uncles that are still kicking around. They're 77 to 80 years old, and they're out here all the time. Other friends. People love it, and it's dirty. It's screaming hot in the summer. It's cold in the winter. Like it's really great living like that, but it's awful. Like, on one hand, you really can't really get it very clean, so you don't worry about it.
Sure.
But on the other hand, you can't ever really get it very clean.
Sure.
But people come out here all the time. Gas prices have hurt that.
Sure.
Actually.
Sure.
But there's almost always There are almost always a dozen people here on Saturday till like midnight.
Well, and we're going to go eat dinner tonight, and you said, so I'm staying between here and Tulsa, the city, which I won't explain exactly where that is, but you said you want to go into Tulsa and have dinner, and I don't want to go to Tulsa and have dinner. I want to have dinner out here where it's like I would rather eat like with the rural town. You know, when Rachel and I left, I don't think I told you this story. When Rachel and I left your place last time, the next town to the east of here, little tiny town, has a little diner in it. And because we didn't want to go back to the west to go to Springfield, and so we looked. Here's a little diner, and we'll just do that on the way home and go get lunch. It was such a cool. I wish my kids had been with me. I wish people from.
Did you go to Clanton's?
I think what's the name of the town?
Veneta.
No, it wasn't in Veneta. It starts with
Pryor.
I, maybe Pryor.
Yeah.
It was a little one in Pryor.
Yeah,
little one in Pryor, and the food was really good, but it wasn't the best food I ever had. It was typical small town diner, but what it was the culture there.
Yeah.
Everybody, men held doors open for women. I remember high school kids got a boyfriend and girlfriend. He opened her car door. He opened the door for her. A family pulled up in a van, and I watched one of the cooks run out from behind, and he was carrying a little ramp. And he put the ramp down, and Grandpa was in a wheelchair, and they pulled him out of the van in a wheelchair, and they laid down the ramp, and they wheeled him up the ramp and wheeled him into the. And I was like, people from New York City don't understand this. This is not a culture that people on the coast get. And I'm not. It's not about just kids. And I know that not everybody is like that, but it was a little bit of a wake up call to me living in the Ozarks. To see that, I can only imagine what it would have been. And I told Rachel, man, I wish my kids, the waitresses were kind, but not overbearing, not fake. They did their job. They were kind. It was just right. The atmosphere was just right. And, and then the whole meal cost Rachel and I $20. It was that. And
but wait a minute. Pryor is full.
Right. I wasn't going to say that. You don't want to say the town anyway.
Well, you already did.
You said the town. No. So tell us a little bit about some of the projects you have going on out here. So you moved into the barn, and you started to kind of build the farm first, and so you've got a pretty good sized farm. You've got garden, you've got an orchard, you got fruit trees, you got chickens. Your close friends. We get to come out 5-6 times a year and buy chickens from you. And
we when I bought this, it was completely unmanaged and had been unmanaged for a long time. It was an utter mess. I did nothing but cut brush for a year. I mean, there's a brush pile over there.
Yeah.
There's one up the hill over here. I mean, there's a brush pile every 500 feet. It's ridiculous. Sawbriars and scrub and
have
eastern
you
red
burnt
cedar.
any of that yet?
Oh, dude, I burned. I mean, I
Dude,
haven't
I'm
burned.
terrified. I've got a huge one up in my land. I'm scared to burn a brush pile that big.
Did you see the one by the pond?
Yeah. Is it?
It's as big as the
I
house.
mean, what, you just wait till it rains or snows or
I
something?
want to wait till it snows and
that's kinda
we're
what I
light it up.
Okay.
Yeah, cut brush for a year and a half. Yeah. But before we do that, we'll talk about this culture thing. So our friend moved down here.
Yes.
From the north.
Yes. One of our coaches at Blunt.
Yeah, he applied for a visa.
Yep.
And we granted it, but he's provisional.
That's a joke.
And
provisional visa.
Right. And so my daughters were talking to him, and they were calling him by his first name. And his wife, I don't know if he knows this story.
Okay.
She pulls my oldest one aside and says, "Hey, you need to call him Mr. So-and-so. That's we have our kids call him, your dad, Mr. So-and-so, and you need to call him Mr. So-and-so." And Riley's like, "I'm not going to do that." Because they don't understand that you call somebody Mr. or Mrs. if you do business with them.
Right,
We're
if
in
you don't
Oklahoma.
really know them. Right.
Right. And if they're an older person and you care about them, it's Miss Susan, it's Mr. Jim.
Right.
Or if they're really close, they may not be your uncle, but you might call them aunt or uncle.
Right.
And if you're kind of in between, you're not old enough to be Miss Susan or Mr. whatever, then you're just the first name.
Right.
It's
a term of endearment.
It is.
Yeah, it's the same. I had the same conversation.
I've been meaning to tell her that because she got on to my daughter about it. And my daughter, she didn't go into it with her. In fact, she probably doesn't even really think about it.
Right, sure.
But I need to tell her, she's not just lifting her leg on you guys. Like that's not.
Yep.
That's unnatural to do that.
Yep. Yeah, I've got a good friend. I was raised in the South, in Tennessee and Mississippi in the South, and we call people sir and ma'am still, and it's also a term of endearment. It's not the business. So I would say, if you're squatting, I would say, good job, sir, nice work, sir, and I had a client, an online coaching client, who's a good friend of mine who comes from the same city as the coach you're talking about. And he said, "Hey, why don't you stop calling me sir?" And I explained the same thing. I said, "That's a term of endearment. So I would call you Mr. Smith, Mr. So-and-so, last name. If it wasn't, right, sir it's a both a term of endearment and a show of respect. And it's not that you are older than me, or it's not an eldership thing.
Right,
it's like,
right.
it's part of that culture. So yeah, the culture is just completely different between in areas of the country, and certainly the coast versus the Midwest. You see a dramatic difference. So
And we're full.
and we're full. So now tell me about the farm. So what do you got going on out here?
Oh, too much. I move so very slow. I don't know if people can hear it. We've got a windmill over there. It's a 1968 model air motor 702. I bought it up in Kansas when we were under like the big lockdown. We drove up there, bought two of them, and rebuilt it. I've stood it up. It's pumping water now. We've got a small vegetable garden that I put in a less than ideal place, and didn't really amend the soil just to get going. But I've got a great big sort of market garden that we'll be planting in the fall. That's up on the hill. I've got about 80 fruit trees.
Yeah, so your big garden you didn't plant this year just because it wasn't ready yet in spring.
Well,
it was too.
I knew where I wanted it to be, and I covered that spot with. I surveyed it, laid it all out. And covered it with silage tarps for like 14 months. I wanted to kill everything under it I could, to get rid of all the weed pressure I could. Sure. And now I'm deep forking. I'm broad forking the aisles in it and working the compost in. And it's got. Well, I got a second dump truck full of compost in it, delivered yesterday, and we'll be planting a fall garden in it. So anyway, it laid there. It laid there under tarp for a year and a half because I didn't want to be. It's big.
Yeah,
it's 50. That one's 50 by 100, and then I'm going to move north and I'm going to put another one that's 50 by 100. And I can't be cultivating a brand new garden that's 5,000 square feet.
Right.
So I was taking my time. We covered it up with tarps, and to kill all those weeds and bake it under there. It's a silage tarp. Some people call them a panda tarp. It's white on one side, black on the other. So we put them black side up. It's food grade, and. I ought to put a thermometer under there
just to see. Sure.
I bet it gets 170 under that thing.
Yeah, sure. Especially when it's 105 here.
Yeah, so I covered that up for 14 months or whatever. So I've just now roll it back, work an aisle, cover it back up.
What do you plan on planting there this fall?
Garlic, onions, turnips, collards.
Yeah.
Some winter squashes.
Cool season lettuces or greens and root vegetables, tubers, things like that.
The turnips and such. But I'm only going to plant about maybe half of it, and then we'll do the rest of it and cover.
Like butternut squash or pumpkin or
anything, do some of that
squashes. Stuff. Yeah.
Hey, no pumpkins.
Okay. Oh, that's right.
No,
that's right. Can you plant pecans?
We have dignity.
You got pecan trees out
here?
We
do. I have. I plant. Yeah. Can you see the stakes out there in the pasture?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, there are 40 paper shell pecans.
No pumpkin pies cooked here at the Hambrick household in Thanksgiving, but many a pecan pie.
Well, yeah. We have some native pecans on the place, but I planted, those are all paper shell. They're Kanza and Shawnee are the varieties out through the creek bottom over there. And then there's fruit trees up on the hill here. We've got apple, pear, plum, fig, peach. I have one cherry. I planted 9 cherries, and of all the trees I planted, those are the only ones that died. My place hates cherries. I planted 3 different varieties, and all of them but one died. But the other trees all made it just fine.
Interesting.
I picked varieties that, the ag extension people, their test gardens said are good in this area, and even then they didn't make it. And then we've got thornless blackberries there, and then I've got Triple Crown blackberries in there. Table grapes are kind of farther up the hill there. Greenhouse is back there.
Do wine at some point? Is that the
plan? They're table grapes. They're eating grapes.
Oh, they're eating grapes.
Yeah.
You don't have grapevines out here.
Well,
they're still. I understand.
Yeah.
What's the difference in the way? Can you tell when looking at it of grapevine if it's?
Oh, I don't know that much about it.
Okay.
I think it's sugar content and different skin.
Okay.
I think they're looking for different amounts of pectin and different amounts of pigment in those grapes to get your cab to come off or whatever.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so they're all table grapes that'll make good jelly or good to eat.
Yep. Got the greenhouse behind us, you can see. And you started, is that where you started your vegetable garden out there, or what do you use? Yeah, primarily using that.
Started in February, force it in February. And there's nothing in it right now. It's too hot.
Sure.
First of all, don't need to be in it. And
with no reason to be in it in the middle of July.
It's well vented, but I can't keep it under 100 in there right now.
Yeah, sure. And then beautiful home being built back here in the background, you can see, and just did a walk through there and try not to get timber dropped on our head.
Yeah.
And so you got the Mennonites building the house out there. You said they've done an outstanding job.
Yeah, they've been really good.
And you got a full wraparound porch, which is great. And so house is not huge, little 2-story, small footprint house, but with that wraparound porch all around it looks much bigger than it is.
Yeah, the porch is almost the same square footage as the house.
I was going to say, it's huge because it's, how deep is it on that back side? It's
12 feet.
Yeah, it's 12 foot deep.
Yeah.
And then 8 on the sides or something?
Yeah.
That's a big old porch. So yeah, you've got it, and then you've got all kinds of fence work you've done. You've got the fence around the whole place that you've been cutting and chainsawing and watch you do that. And then you've got the big steel fence, metal fence, it's steel out front.
It's steel, yeah.
So all kinds of projects.
Yeah, and yes. Been working on irrigation stuff for these garden spots, and the things I'm doing are mostly infrastructure.
Yeah,
so that I can automate, or at least take a lot of the labor out of watering. Take labor. If an animal gets out, your day is all over. Yeah. Right? So putting in good fence so that we don't have anybody getting out is.
And you don't have any. You have chickens right now. So the chickens
no
we
mammals.
talked about. Right, no mammals, and you've got bees.
Right.
Which is your daughter mostly does that.
Yeah, that's really her
incredible
enterprise.
Honey, and we've been hammering some of that at home. I love putting in my protein shakes.
They're hers. She's got, I think there's 19 hives over there right now.
Yeah.
And
how many, ballpark, how many bees that equates to? No clue.
I have no idea. There's probably, their populations are starting to go down right now. I don't know. There's probably 100,000. Yeah. I mean, the nectar flows over.
Right.
Nectar flows over, so their populations kind of pull back, and they'll ramp back up again, maybe like around September for goldenrod and all that. But I don't know. There's probably 100,000 in a box or something like that.
First mammals planned. There's cow or sheep,
we should have Dexter cattle come September. That's September to October. I've got some reserved that we should be bringing them on over here then.
And will they be on the neighbor's land that you bought? I mean, it's your land, but right, did you buy that land across the road?
Yeah.
Is that where the cattle
no, they'll
primarily?
We're gonna do rotational grazing, so they'll be here and there.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Through the course of 60 to 90 days, they should graze everything.
Sure. So a lot of people have asked. I want to turn the topic just a little bit about how has your so I know you haven't trained a ton in the last few years, but you're still doing some, and you're doing a massive amount of manual labor. You've got your gym in your master bedroom right now, and this won't surprise anybody, but the bedrooms are off limits to all guests, so no one has seen the gym. We don't even know what it looks like, but Charity is still out there, and she trains and presses and still pretty damn strong, even though she hasn't, I don't think, trained quite as much as normal either, right? But she's maintained a relative amount of strength.
Yeah, we train twice a week.
Yep.
I'm basically doing one lift a day, even though it's twice a week. So I'll squat and press, and then the next day I deadlift and bench.
Right.
She's doing 3 movements per session. She pressed 135 for 3 by 5 the other day.
So her strength's in the 85 to 90% range.
Yeah.
And yours is what, in the 75% range?
Oh, maybe not.
Right.
Maybe not. She drives. She's like, I'm just not very strong. I'm like, you just bench.
You just press
135 for 3 fives.
Right.
She pulled 335 for like 3 triples.
Oh, yeah. So still plenty strong.
Yeah.
But
we're not doing enough. She's not doing enough work to eat like we were.
Sure.
So adjusting to.
Plus, how hard is it to eat when it's 100 degrees outside?
Dude, it's hard.
And you're sitting, I know. You think about, for people, I mean, again, I realize most people aren't out working outside at 100-degree heat. But just when you train, a lot of our people train in their garage. In the summertime, when you get done training, you don't want the post-workout anything. Like, you got to come in and cool off.
Right.
And I've noticed, so if I, half an hour, 40 minutes after I'm done training, if I'm in the air conditioning, then I'm like, ooh, I'm getting hungry now. But boy, when you're hot and training out, and so for you to train, you're training in the air conditioning and then coming out in the heat.
Yeah.
And that would be, I think, a lot more difficult. Plus, or just working the land. Like you said, come in at 10 in the morning, 10:30 in the morning. It's hot. It's got to be tough to eat lunch.
lunch is easier than after training, but
what time are you training?
We're typically training about 5 or 6
At night or in the morning?
in the evening.
Night, in the evening. Okay.
Yeah,
That's when it's hottest here.
yeah.
Is it like that all over there? I was telling Rachel,
Oh, 5 p.m. is the blues,
it's the worst.
man.
It's
oh,
the
God.
hottest. So, I think most people, there's this kind of traditional thought. It's like, oh, noon is when it's, dude, noon is nothing compared to 5 o'clock at night.
The sun is like coming, it gets under the brim of your hat.
Yeah, yeah.
It's low in the sky.
And it's cooked the ground all day.
The soil is heated up all day.
It's brutal. Yeah,
yeah.
so it typically, if it gets over 100, it's over 100 from like 3:30 to 6.
Yeah.
And it's not from noon to 3.
Right,
It's the
or
next
later.
3 hours. Yeah, or later. Yeah, last night at 8, I took a picture. It was 96 last night at 8:03. 96 actual temperature, not heat index, at after 8 p.m. last night.
I woke up at 4 this morning and it was 87.
Yeah.
But then this cool front blew
came
in, and then by
dropped to
5:30,
82.
it was in the 70s by about 5:30.
Yeah.
No, I'm not nearly as strong. I can't recover. I can't recover. When we moved out here
From the training, or it's
From
a
all of
combination.
it.
I was going to say, you're out here. I mean, again, you're not out here using combines. You're out here holding a chainsaw.
Yeah.
That's not quite the same thing, right? I mean,
I've been broad forking this garden.
Yeah.
Do you know what this is?
No.
We ought to go look at it for your Instagram or something. My broad fork, I think, is 20 inches wide. It has 5 tines on it. They're 16 inches long, and there's 2 steel handles.
Okay.
So, and there's a crossbar. These tines come down from the crossbar.
Yeah, I've seen
so
this.
I jump on that, and
yeah.
you work it into the soil.
Yeah.
And then you pry back on that. Well, I'm breaking ground here. It's never been tilled.
Right,
Or it hasn't been
right.
tilled since the 60s.
Right.
And there's hard pan under there because they did till it,
Right.
because nobody knows how to do anything. So I'm essentially doing tricep press downs or dips.
Yeah.
Hundreds and hundreds of them.
Right.
Right. And then I have to go press.
Right.
And I'm just
triceps
wrecked.
yeah.
So
yeah.
I do all this medium intensity or low intensity, long session
here.
stuff. And I'm just like, I only had 3 fast twitch muscle fibers, and they've adapted to low intensity now, you know. So I squatted 3x5 for 205 the other day. It was just brutal. It was just brutal.
Right.
I'm like farting and like I got a pop-up blood vessel in my eye.
From a 205.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. It's
I
brutal.
get it. Yeah, sure.
I'm pulling like in the high 3s for 5.
sure.
So that's fine. I pressed 150 for 3x5 the other day, so that's okay. Bench press is not very good, and I don't know why. Like my bench press is weak, and I don't, who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. I mean, I do what I can do, and that's all I can do. When I moved out here, I weighed 243. That is too heavy for this. And I'm probably 225, 220 to 225 right now. Yeah, I really need to come down about 15 more.
Yeah,
It's just too much body weight to haul around.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
How much, we've talked about when you were running data storage and you were living in the city, and so you had just an office job, we've often talked about voluntary hardship, and like this weightlifting and strength training is the thing that's so general that anybody can do that will help give you this sort of refining effect of voluntary hardship. And you've talked about, as you've come out here, like your whole life is voluntary hardship. And so the need for strength, like you don't need strength training for voluntary hardship anymore. You need strength training for strength training to maintain the strength. And that's it, right? So it's become almost a singular sort of piece, or I mean, how do you view that?
Yeah, like you showed me these questions that people had sent in, and people were talking about, how does the strength help you? Like injury prevention. That's like
For
almost
sure.
the whole thing.
Sure.
Because if something's heavy, like
You don't go tear a bicep on it.
no,
You've got
that's
right.
stupid. I'm going to go get a lever, or I'm going to get the front loader.
Sure.
That's ridiculous. You don't want to just be like max effort, whatever, and blowing out O-rings and stuff. It's about stumbling when you're carrying 2 5-gallon buckets full of water or whatever. It's about injury prevention mostly and bone density. Did I tell you about me injuring my foot?
No.
I was driving fence posts on this west fence with a fence post driver.
I don't like where this is going already.
Clang. And I'm putting in Timeless brand PVC fence posts. They are the insulator for the electric fence. So they're PVC. And they're a T-post, and you can just drive them with a regular T-post driver. But because they're PVC, they got a little flex in them. So when you hit it, it makes a sine wave like an arrow.
Yeah,
You
sure.
see the slow
Yeah,
motion
sure.
thing of an arrow. So I was wailing on it. I was driving it through a tree root. I could feel the tree root in there. I was just bam, bam, bam. I'm 6'2".
Right.
So I pull it up, and I missed the top of the post because the thing's flexing. And I hurled that post driver. I didn't drop it. I threw it as hard as I could onto the arch of my left foot.
Were you wearing your work boots?
I was wearing muck boots.
Okay.
And I finished driving the post.
Oh, God.
And I got in the mule. I hit it so hard that it didn't hurt. And I was like, this is not good.
I got numb instantly.
Right. So I had to 3 more whacks. I finished that, and I went over to the mule, and I took my boot off, and that didn't take more than 20 seconds to do that. And if I had waited another 45 seconds, I'd have had to cut that boot off.
Yeah, right.
Went to the emergency room. It had already turned colors. It looked dead. It looked like a corpse's foot. It was like a potato, and it was like purple.
Like a corpse had been out in the heat and swelled up.
I hit it so hard on top of it, it bruised the bottom of my foot. They x-rayed it, didn't break it.
That's bizarre.
Well, it's deadlifting and squatting and all that bone density, you know?
Yeah, sure.
By the way, so I go in there, they take 3 x-rays, this way, and then straight down.
Yep.
When I threw that thing down, I barked my shin. So they shot my shin with a little lidocaine and cleaned it up to see if I needed stitches. I didn't. They gave me 2 Motrin, and they gave me one of those Cam Walker boots. $1,900.
Unbelievable.
$1,900. It was a Saturday evening, so I couldn't go to the minor emergency place. So I went to the the little emergency room in the 12-bed hospital over here. $1,900.
Ridiculous.
We're not going to do that.
Right.
We're going to have to talk about that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So have you talked about that yet?
No, I got the bill day before yesterday.
Okay,
it's on my list.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
It's a similar thing with COVID. It was ridiculous. So last thing, I know people want to know how much of this is sort of insulating yourself. The world has changed dramatically since we kind of stopped recording the podcast together towards the beginning of COVID, right? So in mid 2020, I think.
Yeah, you just
and I just recovered from the as you call it, and so
you believe all this stupid.
Oh, we got
feedback.
more 1-star reviews for that.
It's so stupid.
It's
Anyway. Who was? They're like, oh, I'm sure he has some crazy conspiracy theory about it. Yeah, who was right? You dumb.
Right. Yeah. So how much is even being out here somewhat of? Certainly, you can't be completely isolated from things like inflation. There are some things you can do because you're eating your own calories at some point, but it takes a lot of gas to run
it's
equipment
terrible.
out here. It takes you still got to go buy equipment to the stuff we were talking about, the lumber. Obviously, the cost of lumber to build a house. One of the reasons you didn't start your house last year is the lumber was so ridiculous. You had to wait a year, so you lived in a barn. Now the lumber's come down 50%. But how does what's going on in the world kind of change the way you live your everyday life out here, kind of plan stuff? And then I don't know, do you have some sort of advice for the listeners who aren't doing this, who are still going to the day job?